Hey, everybody.
Hello. Welcome, everyone. All these faces. All these faces and some black boxes.
Morning, Matt, Carrie, Janet, Adriana.
Dun, dun, dun.
Besides my notifications on my phone, most of them are just stock notifications that were down 5, 7, 10%. What do you need to know that?
Listen, we don't need that kind of downer on this call, Chris.
Morning, Robert.
Good morning.
Hey, Carrie. Right. Well, it's 11:02, Chris.
Morning, chat.
What else we got?
Carrie's logging on.
Yay, Terry.
We'll give it one more minute.
Okay.
Just because the beginning is so good, so good. I don't want anyone to miss it.
That first slide, like,
We could end it there. We can end it there.
you know, we really built up that anticipation, Chris. Like, we can't let them down now. All right, let's get rocking and rolling. I'm sure other people will join us, and we are recording. So you guys, welcome to our monthly Path to $1 Million. This is the mastermind and the Ben Kinney Co. and the Experience Brokerage Network, where our top agents come together to mastermind with our special guest. And of course, this month is the one, the only Chris Suarez. So let's get right into it, Chris, and get rocking.
Awesome. Well, thanks for showing up. I know there's always more attendance when there are guests and it's not me, but you get me today. And largely because as we as a group and leadership team got together, we thought we're in an interesting moment in our history and in our businesses. And I really wanted to sort of gather the troops. No pun intended, as we jump into our material today, but gather the troops and really talk a little bit about what's going on. What should we be aware of? What can we learn from the past? And then how do we lead into the future as sort of top business owners amongst our brokerage network? So today, that's exactly what I want to do. I'm gonna share a story, and it's actually one that I had written down after reading about, gosh, this is maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I this week got inspired to go back to those notes because there's something going on in our industry and in our market right now that caused me to sort of remember what I had read about this guy. Anyone know who that is? Just unmute and share. I mean, clearly that's an artist rendition of someone, but who is that?
Attila the Hun.
No, but that was a pretty good guess actually, because
Genghis
they
Khan.
don't look very different. Who was that? Did someone else give a guess?
Genghis Khan.
Yeah, Matt with the history score. Someone give him a prize. I don't have any prizes on me, but you get a prize, Matt, for getting that right. Yeah, it's Genghis Khan. So we're going to learn a lesson from Genghis Khan today. He is one of the greatest. Is known as one of the greatest military minds who ever lived. But more importantly, he was a perpetual student. His victories, and there were many of them, right? And I'm not here to say good, bad, and different. Like I'm just looking at him as a military mind, as someone we will learn from today. But his victories were often the result of his ability to absorb whatever technology, whatever practices, whatever innovation, whatever culture his empire touched. And he touched a lot of them on his path to conquest. There is one theme in his reign, and in the several centuries of dynastic rule that followed him. And it is this: if we're going to take a note, if we're going to learn something today on our path to $1 million, he exercised the art of learning. He was a learner more than he was a warrior. Under Genghis Khan direction, the Mongols were as ruthless about stealing and absorbing the best of each culture that they encountered as they were about conquest itself, right? Like he was a vicious warrior, but interestingly enough, he was a learner and a student of every single culture that they absorbed or took over. Now, what's interesting about the time that he lived in is that there was essentially like no technological invention, right? In every single battle, every enemy he encountered, it wasn't like this birth of technology during that time period, but he was able to learn something new every single time. And here's why. Because Khan wasn't born a genius. He wasn't in an environment of enlightenment, but he was, as one biographer later wrote about him, and that quote is on the screen, he was a persistent cycle of pragmatic learning, experimental adaptation, and constant revision driven by his uniquely disciplined and focused will. Now that's a lot. So who'd like to put that in today's words? What does that mean? What does it mean that he was a persistent cycle of pragmatic learning, experimental adaptation, constant revision, driven by uniquely disciplined and focused will? Who was he? How would you sum him up? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love pauses and quiet, so I'm good with it. Who wants to share? Anyone?
I would say
Thank
he's,
you, Leslie. That's so kind.
I was gonna just jump in here. Katie and I were brainstorming. Adaptable, resilient, and growth-minded are like the words that we throw around a lot.
Yeah. What about the last two?
Ooh, disciplined and focused will.
It's interesting, but right now we all should write down that description and ask ourselves whether or not we are that. Because right now, in this moment in our industry, we need to be, as business owners, right? As leaders of organizations and teams. Khan's first powerful victories came from the first came from a reorganization of his military units. He began to split his soldiers into groups of 10. Where did he learn that, or where did he get that? Like from the first time he encountered the neighboring Turkic tribes. And in fact, he began to convert the Mongols to the decimal system without him even knowing it. So there was mathematical innovation that he began to adapt. Soon enough, as they began to expand their empire, it brought them in contact with another, quote, technology that they'd never experienced before, and that was walled cities. In their Tangut raids, he first learned sort of the ins and outs of war against fortified cities. Like he had to become a student of how are these built? Why are they built that way? How do they work? How are they engineered? And so once he began to learn that and began to lay siege to other fortified cities, something that they had never seen before, he quickly became an expert. And so he actually employed a bunch of Chinese engineers and said, hey, we need to teach our soldiers how to build siege machines that can knock down these city walls. And so they did. His next campaign against Druked, Khan learned the importance of actually not so much warfare, but winning hearts and minds and being a leader by working with scholars and royal families of the lands he conquered. He began to manage and lead territories differently as well. In every single country or every city that he either conquered or held, he would pull in the smartest scribes, the doctors, the thinkers, the advisors. He would engage with them and he would have them train and teach and coach his troops and his leadership team. Like he literally traveled with interrogators and translators for precisely this purpose. So we think of him as this warrior, but in fact, he was a student. It is what made him so successful. It was a habit that would eventually survive his death. So while the Mongols themselves were dedicated seemingly to the art of war, and they were great at it, they would put to good use every craftsman, every merchant, every scholar, every entertainer, every cook, every skilled worker they came in contact with. Like they were talent absorbers, if you will. It's interesting, in his biography, some of the notes that I took was he brought lemons to China for the first time. He brought Chinese noodles to the West for the first time. He spread Persian carpet, German mining technology. He brought French metalworking across the country and continent. The cannon, which revolutionized warfare, was said to be the resulting fusion of Chinese gunpowder with Muslim flamethrowers and European metalwork. Do you see what he did? Like he learned from everyone and everything and then adapted his strategy. It was his openness to learning that brought them together. Right now, we need to do that. It's not enough for us to have been students of our industry early. Like most of you on this call have been around for a long time, and not by age, but you've been around, like you've been building your business for some time. And we had to go through the learning phase. And I hate that expression because that would imply that it ends, that it is a phase. Being a student is a position that we need to assume for life. And I feel that right now, as much as any time that I've been in this industry in 20 years, it's important that we say, hey, I'm going to continue learning. I'm going to continue learning about what drives the industry. I'm going to continue learning about what drives the economy and home ownership and purchasing power. And we have to learn from everyone and everything. We have to learn from the moments we win. We have to learn from the moments we lose. Most military cultures and people in general, they seek to impose values and control over what they encounter. Think about that. Think about modern warfare. Isn't that the case? Go in and conquer a nation, or think about the war going on right now. What is that? It's about imposing certain values or ways of life or beliefs over another group, as opposed to what? Being able to weigh each situation objectively, swap out previous practices for new ones learned. Now, all great businesses start that way, but somehow something happens to us. And we get stuck in the way that we've been doing things. Take the theory of disruption, right? This is just the business theory of disruption. The business theory of disruption, in fact, like not to get too deep into disruption, but as we look at our industry in and of itself, disruptors say this. They posit that at some point in time, every industry, including ours, will be disrupted by some trend or innovation that despite all the resources in the world, the incumbent, meaning you, like the people that were already here, the incumbent interest will be incapable of responding to that disruption. Why? Because the theory of disruption says that you, us, we've lost the ability to learn. We've stopped being students. We're unwilling to change. Peter Drucker, like one of the greatest business thinkers of all times, right? I've talked about him a lot in these calls. He says that it's not enough to simply want to learn. As people progress, they have to understand how to learn and then set up processes to facilitate that education, that learning. What your team lacks in experience, he says on your screen, they can make up for with initiative. Initiative is contagious. Experience is not. Isn't that interesting? Now, past initiative is the best indicator of future initiative. So ask yourself, like, am I showing initiative? Have I shown initiative? The greatest disruptions of industries are facilitated by those who are obsessed with the industry, who are constant learners of the industry. So today, I'm going to ask that we spend the next bit of time just being obsessed with our industry. And if we're obsessed with our industry, then we're willing to learn from the past and then understand how do we lead into the future. So let's start by just doing that. I have over the last probably month spent too many hours, just studying what has gone on, what has happened in the past, what is similar to today, what can we learn for the purpose of what? Advising clients, right? For the purpose of sitting in front of a buyer or a seller or an agent and saying, hey, this is what we believe is going on in the economy. This is how it will affect our industry. This is what the opportunities are on our current and consistent path or march to $1 million, right? To continue to be big business owners. So let's go back. And this, most of this is from a writer that I respect, an economist, and it's just a thought process that I subscribe to. And I just wanted to show you one line of thought. Remember, we might say this is one of the cultures, if you will, that Genghis Khan sort of conquered and then said, hey, what can we learn from it? So let's go back in time in history, and take a step back and say, hey, what was going on in certain years? What were people saying? Because there's always people that have something to say. And then what actually happened? What you're going to realize is as we go from 2012 to today, as we go back a decade and look at what people were saying and what happened, and then we go back a little bit further because we'll see some really interesting similarities, and we'll be able to compare where we are versus where we were. Now, in 2012, what were people saying? Remember that conversation? Some of us were around, some of us weren't, but there was so much conversation about shadow inventory. Like I remember having conversations with some of you. Gosh, what do you think about the shadow inventory? What do you think about the shadow inventory? Yep, this shadow inventory is going to really cause prices to fall. We better be careful. But what happened? Well, look, in 2011 and 2012 and 2013, did the shadow inventory show up? Did that break? No, in 2012, the monthly supply data got below 6 months of inventory. And I want us to think about that number. I know we use that when we talk about what's a stable market, but we're going to talk about that number 6 months as something much more indicative of pricing and future pricing than anything. It's actually more indicative than affordability, and it's more indicative than interest rates. And it's more, like it is a very, very important number when we look back at the history of real estate, right? As we look at what can we learn. The shadow inventory was not an issue. Why? Because it took years to sort of filter through that distressed supply little by little by little. So in 2012, what were they saying? Oof, prices are going to fall. Did they? They did not. In 2013, what were they saying? Well, mortgage rates were rising. The Fed was tapering. Housing might crash, right? That's what they were saying. But what happened? Well, remember, the Fed was trying to prevent a housing crash. So what were they doing? Like they actually increased the 10-year treasury yield from 1.6 to 3%. Does that sound familiar? What happened this week? Yeah, it sounds super familiar, right? This week, we went to today it's at 3.3 compared to 3.4 the day before, but last year is at 1.5. This is a very interesting correlation. Now go back to this chart, and I know it's small, but if you can look way back in the beginning there in 2013, you see that treasury yield go from 1.5 to about 3.1, exactly what's happened. Now go back to 2021 and follow your eye over. It looks near identical, doesn't it? Interestingly enough, the long-term average of that treasury yield is 4.2. Now, the reality is back in 2013, it did cause housing to cool. But interestingly enough, home price actually, although home price growth cooled, there was a deceleration of the acceleration of home prices. We saw no negative year-over-year price declines that year, or for that matter, the year after. Same thing happened in 2013. Same thing is happening right now. So what were they saying in 2014? After that happened, they said, oof, housing's going to crash because purchase application data was down 20% year over year. Like, we don't remember these things because, one, we weren't around for it, or two, we just remember the last year. Like, we remember the last 3 years. We remember the last 4 years. But in 2014, the headlines were the same as they were last week and the week before, saying, gosh, purchase applications are down 20% year over year. Like, we're looking, it looks like we're headed for a crash. That was the lowest, by the way, the lowest purchase application data we had ever seen up until that point. So did the market crash? Well, even though sales fell like they are doing and will do right now, and even though inventory grew, which we expect it to do now, home prices didn't decline. Why? The only reason why was because the month supply of homes never came close to breaking over 6 months. Now, what you're looking at, for those of you who don't know, but what you're looking at is, this is the number of homes, right? And this isn't thousands, but a number of homes on the market, actual homes. So not month supply, but how many homes are for sale right now? Like, look at that number. From 2013, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, what has happened to that number? The actual number of homes on the market. It's progressed. I mean, yep, we see it go up and down cyclically. Welcome to the market cycles, but it is progressively trending where? Not up, right? It is progressively trended down. Now, do we expect it to go up? Yes. But in 2014, it's reminiscent of 2022, we did not see prices go down. Why? Because inventory never crossed over that 6-month mark. Now let's fast forward, because I'm not going to bore you with every month and every year since 2013. But what happened in 2016, 17, and 18? Here's a compilation of what headlines were saying, what people were saying, and then what happened. In 2016, they said, well, manufacturing was in a recession. Stocks had pulled back 15%. Granted, we've pulled back like 23%, but manufacturing was in a recession. Stocks had pulled back 15%. Where there, everyone was saying, hey, this is a general recession. The reality, home prices grew because inventory did not go up. Inventory actually fell in 2016. So what happened in 2017? They said, well, gosh, home prices are now back to the housing bubble peak. Prices are going to crash. Remember that? Most of you are around for that. We have now reached previous peak. What happened in 2017? Inventory fell again and home prices rose. So then what happened in 2018? Oh gosh, with mortgage rates rising, new home sales sector getting hit hard, housing is going to crash in 2018. Some of us don't remember that, but that's what they were saying. And the reality, what happened? Existing home sales was in great shape. The number of units fell in 2018, but total inventory still didn't grow. Something's happened in that market. Supply data increased a little bit, took a little bit longer to buy homes. We crossed over the 30-day on market mark in 2018. We got up to 45 to 50 days on the market. But interestingly enough, there was no inventory growth. 2019, 20, 21, most of us remember this. We may not remember the headlines of every year. In 2019, what were they saying? Gosh, housing's going to crash, because inventory was up year over year on the month supply data for just a few months. And sales trends were still falling. So what happened? Well, rates fell, right? Household housing rebounded in the second half of 2019. Real home price actually went negative just briefly because people had choices. Days on market climbed over 30 days again. But what happened in the end? It ended with a phenomenal housing market in 2019. 2020, remember that? March, April, we're going to have a housing crisis. COVID-19 is right, was this sort of beacon of the crashing housing market. But what happened? Economic recovery happened real fast. 2021, what people said, gosh, there's a ton of people coming off of forbearance. This could really cause a housing crash. And what happened? Well, the economy and household income, right? We've all but eliminated everybody in forbearance. There's a tiny segment of the market right now that is not fully recovered from forbearance. Right? Most people got their jobs back. In fact, people making over $60,000 a year and more, almost 100% of those people got their job back in 2021 after layoffs of 2020. So that's the past. What about the future? I know some of you didn't come here for an economic lesson. You're like, gosh, this is not what I expected today. But remember, the premise of today is if we can point to things that we've learned in the past, from markets that we have conquered, if you will. We took down that market in 14 and 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 and 19 and 20 and 21. So how do we use that, or what do we learn for the future? Here's what we should be aware of. This is what's going to drive our market. One thing is for sure, as you look at this data point, this is the demographic analysis, right, for population as of April 1st of a couple of years ago. That's when we got the latest report. People aged 28 to 34 are the biggest age group ever in our country. When we add that to move up, move down, cash, investor buyers, like we have a ridiculous demand for housing. This is what's driving that market. This is what's driving the need for housing. I've talked a long time about household formation, right? 28 to 34. Households are being formed in that group, right? Why? Because they've maybe stayed home longer. They've gone to school longer. But guess what? At a certain point in time, that group grows up. And now they're adults, and now they need housing. They form houses. So look at that demographic. It is the largest demographic in our country. And that is why we have problems with inventory. As you can see here, this is the NAR total inventory data. This has been falling since 2014. Interestingly enough, look at where we're at. We're under 1.5 million homes. Historically, 2 to 2.5 million homes is normal. And normal doesn't mean prices are going to drop, right? Normal means we're at 4%, 3.5%, 5% appreciation. So it's hard for anybody to look you in the eyes as a consultant and say, hey, I think we're going to see some prices crashing. Hey, I'm going to sit this market out and I'm going to wait because I think with the interest rates where they are, that prices are going to go down. No, will we see demand drop? Potentially, yes. Why? Because people that could afford a home before, unfortunately, can't today. That's what's difficult for us to stomach right now. When we see 3% go to 6.5%, yeah, it's difficult to stomach. But what is that going to do? Get us from 1 million homes to 1.5 million? Get us from 1 million homes to 2 million homes? Get us from 1 million homes to 2.5 million homes on the market? Heck, we should be thinking about pricing when you look around and you see 2.5 million homes of inventory on the market, because we have finally gotten back to normal. But until then, don't be scared into the conversation that prices are going to drop. there is a lot of economic data that said, hey, as we look at 2020 to 2025, our market could sustain a growth of about 25% in value. Well, here's a concern, right? In 2020 and 2021, we ate up 23% of that growth in value, right? You see that in that last segment on this chart here. Like we saw a 23% increase in 2 years as opposed to 5 years. But what does that mean? We still have 4 to 5% growth expected over the next 3 years. So interestingly enough, we do need to slow down the growth of pricing and housing. Does anyone disagree with that? But slowing down the growth of pricing does not mean we're pushing it backwards. So was the market too hot in 20 and 21? Yeah. So congratulations for being in a too hot market. But the home price growth is not going to stop because interest rates are 6%. It's not going to. Now, what we hope happens is inflation slows down. I mean, I think we have to take things in perspective and ask ourselves this, well, like all of our industry is crying right now because we're at a 6.5% interest rate to get a home. But there's a lot of American families that are thrilled to see that, hoping that what happens, like we're not increasing the price of bread and milk and gas and diapers by 10%. Like that's what we're trying to solve, right? Discretionary income is going to be an issue too if we don't solve inflation. So we're on the right path to do that. So what would we need to see before home prices fall? Well, traditionally, people believe that we need 6 months of supply because that's the one thing that has been constant before any housing bubble or housing price crash. And we've seen those before. I'm not saying it's an impossibility, but let's watch that inventory level more than watching the news about interest rates affecting pricing of houses. Now, I want to share a couple other things. If we're going to have this conversation around what could crash prices and what could lead to us having these bubble conversations, this is the number of consumers with new foreclosures and bankruptcies. What do you see back in 03, 04, 05 versus what do you see in 2020 and 2021 and 2022? What jumps out at you?
A whole bunch of bankruptcies.
Big spikes.
Yeah, there is a massive differential between what we saw in 03 and 04 and 05 between bankruptcies and foreclosures. Why were those happening? Why were bankruptcies and foreclosures happening in 03, 04, and 05?
Predatory lending.
Yes. Predatory lending. That's an interesting expression, by the way. It's like a media expression. And it was, everybody blaming the lenders, but raise your hand. Like some of us loved those loans. Like we were happy to be predated. Is that an adjective? I don't know. But the fact is yes, like there was so much bad debt. Like the debt exceeded the value of homes. In fact, people took on household debt. And by household debt, I mean debt for cars and debt for school and debt for purchasing and debt for homes. Like I don't have the graph here, but interestingly enough, the only debt that has increased by percentage of income in America over the last decade is actually education debt, school debt, which is a whole nother conversation I'd love to have with you about what I think is wrong with the educational system, but that's a whole nother story. Some would argue that, hey, that's good debt because at least we're becoming a more educated country, right? An educated society. But the fact is this chart alone should get us to be able to sit in front of someone that says, oh gosh, I'm going to wait for the foreclosures to show up. I hear foreclosures again. Hey, Dana, yes, I'm really interested in buying, but let me know when you start seeing foreclosures pop on the market. Hey, Matt, I'm really interested in all those foreclosures in your market. Well, I'm not going to say there aren't going to be any, but the fact is people aren't going to sell their homes at 30%, 50%, 70% off market bid prices to get out at all costs, because they don't have to get out at all costs. If they hit an economic struggle, what can they do? Well, quite honestly, they can still take out 10% of their equity if they really needed it at a 6% interest rate and pay their bills for the next 5 years. Like, there is so much available to them economically because of what we've gone through. And I'm not promoting that, but I'm just saying that when you have options, you don't hit the foreclosure button. When you have options, you don't hit the bankruptcy button. And that's because we have financial health. Look at this. This is one of my favorite things to show a buyer when they're deciding to opt out. Here we show who is getting mortgages. Now there's small numbers, small letters. So here are numbers, but this is what I want you to know. That light blue at the top, that is anybody who originated a mortgage or took out a mortgage and their credit score was 760 and above. Right? That darker line right below, 720 to 759. The light gray line, 660 to 719. The yellow line, that seems pretty big back in 03, 04, 05, that's 620 to 659. Remember the days, the bright blue line on the bottom, less than 620, you're good. Now what's happened? Who has gotten mortgages in 8, 17 and 18 and 19 and 21 and 22? They are healthy financially. They have good credit standing. Do you see this? This is a healthy economy in the real estate space. It wasn't like so we learn from the culture of the past, don't we? We conquered 2003. We took over 2004, and we brought their learning forward in 18 and 19 and 21 and 22. There are some exotic loan debt structures way back in 03 and 04. So as we're having this conversation and looking ahead, interestingly enough, this is perhaps the most important thing to watch and look at. Remember, I said earlier, traditionally, inventory levels between 2 million, 2.5 million. We started this year at 870,000 homes available to purchase. Are you kidding me? And layer that on the graph, right? Like, that's all I'd have to say. We started the year with 870,000 homes available to purchase. And let me talk to you a little bit about demographics and what we're dealing with. And who's showing up at what age. The largest demographic in the country is the prime home buying age. People need housing. Now, if we started the year at 2.2 or 2.4 million in total inventory, and interest rates jumped from 3.5% to 6%, 6.5%, and pending sales were off by 15%, and all those things lined up, yeah, this group, we'd be having a different conversation. So our conversation is, yes, there will be less purchases for the next 6 months we experienced in the final 6 months of 2021. But the fact is nobody should be predicting. I shouldn't use generalities, but I wouldn't be predicting as a consultant that we're going to see declines in pricing. In theory, even if we had 2.5 million homes for sale, what would happen? We wouldn't see major price gains, but typically that's a normal market. That's a normal market. Now, in any unstable market, here's what I would say. Don't wait to 2.4. I'd be looking at our market and saying, hey, when this market gets to 1,750,000, 2 million homes, I'm going to really start looking at that inventory. I'm going to really be advising sellers and buyers potentially slightly differently. But the fact is we look at the data as we learn from the past and we apply it to the future. I hope this gives us some confidence in how to advise buyers and sellers, how to train up and coach our agents who are scared right now, who are nervous right now. Like, that's going to be the casualty. Like, the casualty isn't the buyers and sellers right now. The casualty is the number of units available in your marketplace and the number of agents that want to make it. We have to be learners, right? We have to be willing to invest and taking the time to figure out what's going on in our submarkets as well, right? In entry level, in mid level, in luxury, right? In urban and suburban, like what's happening in those markets, so we can advise those clients, but also educate our agents as well. So with that, I want to open it up and just have a sort of a time for us to ask questions about what's going on, feedback on what we just went over. What can we help with right now in the market that we're in? Who wants to share any ahas from the data, and then questions?
Jen's got her hand up. Jen, you ready?
I'll go first. I lost a $1.5 million buyer on Tuesday, referral line.
Oh, you just got muted, Jen.
Sorry.
It's okay. There you go.
They didn't like that. They didn't like that I told them prices weren't going to drop. So this is super relevant to me. Everything you just said. So a ton of ahas, a ton of facts for me to use. But it was very interesting. They went with an agent that told them that their prices would be decreasing, and that if they just held tight, that they could get a better deal on the market.
Yeah.
So it's interesting of how do we, I don't think there's enough people that have the information you just shared with us to explain what normal is, because so few agents have been in the market for as long as most of us. And so they see this as crisis and as urgent and as dire. And I think that there's a huge education piece and adaptability piece that I don't know how to share with other people, with other agents, with other people who are giving the information.
Here, a couple things. One, the good news, Jen, is we don't have to have been in the market long. We just have to be willing to take the initiative, right? What was the quote? What your team lacks in experience, they can make up for initiative. The challenge is if we don't have the experience nor the initiative, what are we going to tell? We're going to tell buyers what they want to hear to procure a sale. And ultimately that isn't going to serve the agent nor the client well at all. What can help us, you are right, is, okay, I need to tell you what you don't want to hear, but let me share with you why I am coming as a consultant. And these are, quite honestly, if you've engaged with them by phone, if you've engaged with them by email, I would literally take the PDFs that we're going to send out after this to this group and say, hey, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. It's caused me a lot of anxiety, to be honest, because I care greatly about my clients making good decisions in the marketplace. And I just wanted to share this data with you. There's some conversation around this data I'd be open to having with you and sharing with you while you continue your search elsewhere. It's just who I am. I provide data to my clients. And now we have 4, not 7 or 9, but we have 2, 3, or 4 charts that we think are the best, and we send that out. Like, that is truly our path to know that, hey, I am here to provide advice and consultative approach. And those that appreciate that and want that and want to know reality are going to continue to work with you, because that's who you've always, knowing you, Jen, that's who you've always been in the marketplace anyway.
Yeah.
Fair?
No, I love that. It is the, I think it's having the stamina, number one, and having the I don't know, ethics, whatever it is, to tell people the truth, not what they want to hear.
Yeah, fair. Who else as they listen today, recognize that we can use this in a different way? Who wants to share what you're thinking about? Maybe adding something that you've used or it's been helpful, or questions in general about the market. Thank you, Jen. The quiet group this morning about a very unquiet topic.
I just
Matt?
wanted to allow somebody else, but, oh, and then Chad's gonna.
Oh,
Thank
God,
you,
go
Chris.
ahead.
Thank you, Chris. What you basically did is gave me some more ammunition for what I've been telling my clients anyways. But you went deeper than I've studied. So it's just great to have that and some more information to share with clients.
Yeah. For those of you that, and as I look around, many of you do have other agents in your world. Just know that they are as nervous as your clients are right now. You may not be, because you've been through multiple markets, but many of us have brought on newer agents. They've only known the last 3 or 4 years. They do go home and watch the news, unlike most of us. Like they hear from their family members who are like, gosh, are you going to make it? You just started. Like, maybe you shouldn't have left your job. Like, they hear all those things. We have to be able to provide them this information and even bring them through that conversation of learning from the past and how that allows them to win in the future. Matt?
I was just gonna say, I'm not sure where you got all of the slides from, but maybe you stole my deck from my previous team meeting, because it was the same charts that I went over on my last team meeting.
Good.
You remember where we found them, so some of the things that I have been talking about with the agents is I don't see us having a crash in prices coming up. What I do see is, and we have already started to see it, is we're going to have a collapse in the volume of transactions. So we've already seen the buyer demand get wiped out due to the decreased affordability across the board. Either in the luxury market with people's, equity portfolios getting crushed, and so they can't move that into the luxury market. The stock market downsizing, they're not going to be looking at a luxury purchase right now as much. Same thing with like the crypto and stuff. And then on the low end, just not being able to afford the higher mortgage payments. So I think we will see a collapse in buyer demand, but I don't see us seeing a spike in supply, because I think that we are going to be in this lock-in effect where anyone that currently owns a house or a property that has these low mortgage rates, which is I think it was 86 or 90% of people are under 5% on their mortgage right now. So we have all these properties that have mortgages under 5. So unless somebody needs to move, I think we're going to see a collapse in the supply also, which will keep inventory levels down.
Yeah, a couple of things from a strategic, I don't disagree with you. I think, and that is why I feel very confident advising a group of top agents that pricing should not be a concern of ours. Let me redefine collapse in number of units, Matt. And you are right, we're definitely going to see that. If we see a 20% pullback in units, we're going to go from about 6.2 million units closed to 5 million, which has historically been kind of where we're at, 5 to 5.2 million homes, right? So we're going back to this normal rhythm. What that means is all the extra million that seemed easy are no longer there. So the easy part of your job went away, which means we're back to working. I know it felt like work over the past couple years, but that's just because there was a lot of easy transactions out there to make some money on. Like, we all got a pay raise based on interest rates. Now we go back to a more normal market. Now, there's 2 things to watch. I think as we look at advising our clients, we have a lot of clients that actually just were the right time at the right place and just got lucky with some 2.9s and 3.1 interest rates. I mean, it's ridiculous to think about. It's like free. And what I think is a great call to that database is the reality is don't let your current interest rate cause you not to do something in the market that is experiential or a lifestyle move. In other words, if you need to move down, if you need to get out of the 2-story and get to a 1, if you need to get out of your 2 and if you need to get out of the 1 and add family members, if you want to get from in town to out of town, whatever it is you choose to do, what that 2.9 allows you to do is actually build wealth through real estate in a way that you were not able to prior, because keeping that house is probably more of an option today than it ever was. Now, it means that some of those sells and buys may not be there, but the majority of our clients should keep that asset that they have locked in at 2.8 to 3.1. They really should, which yes, is going to put pressure on inventory. Here's our opportunity for inventory. If I was strategically looking for inventory, remember, one of the reasons why 4 years ago inventory started getting really locked up is because institutional buyers, and in our markets, maybe less institutional, but more multi-unit buyers decided to purchase. What was the purpose of their purchase for those 3, 5, 7 unit homeowners? It was not like, I'm going to get rich on some rents. I'm going to get rich on $100 net positive every month. It really was the appreciation, winning with appreciation. So there are a lot of homeowners right now that actually has seen the appreciation that they were looking for the 4 and 5 years of holding that investment. I would go back to homeowners that have 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 units, and they've owned those for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and look to them as potential inventory opportunities for your buyers. It is a great time for them to exit out of those assets. It really is. And so I think we will see some inventory for those that bought for appreciation. Some of those funds, I will tell you, as they hear, like they get pressure from their boards, they get pressure from their investors, they get pressure to get out of that asset, right, as it begins to drop. So we're going to see some inventory come on, not much in our market because there weren't massive institutional buyers. There was a few, but I believe that those 3, 4, and 5 unit owners, absolutely, they made their money. Congratulations. We should be high-fiving them and asking them what they would like to do with that now that they're exiting out of it. So I think there's some opportunity there. I would be doing some lead gen around that to create inventory. Cool. Anyone else? Anyone else? Questions, thoughts, ahas from today?
Chris, one more thing. Sorry, unless somebody else has something. Do you still believe? I heard someone the other day that said, if you need to be moving or want to be moving, this is still the lowest the house price is going to be in the next 5 years, right? So even with normal appreciation and our prices plateauing at a point, if interest rates go back down, refinance, but it's still the least these houses are going to cost.
There is no way to argue that, Jen. Like there's no way to argue that. So the only way they cost less is if interest rates go down. The challenge is, are they going to go down in 2024 and 2025? Well, if they are and prices are higher, like my point and my advice, and I've been on the phone too, by the way, for some of my better clients. And I said, if you can afford that mortgage payment, lock in at 6%. Why? Because when it's 4, we'll refi you. Like that, so you drop your payments then. So yeah, I agree with you. Like I 100% agree with you. And that's largely because demographics don't change overnight. The demographic chart is a really important one. 1,000 units on the market across the country is an important one. 1.7, 1.8 months of an inventory is an important one. Like that's not going to change in the next 4 years. So do they want to wait 4 years? Like most people don't want to put their life on hold for 4 years. Like that buyer that said, oh, the other agent said, when? Like, is it fourth quarter that prices are magically going to drop? Because the only time they ever had is when we got 6 months of inventory. So you give me a list of the, I don't know, 1,500 homes that need to come on the market in the Portland metro market to get us to 6 months of inventory, and I'll be there. Like it's impossible.
If you're not tracking what your client's interest rate that they lock in is, you should be, because it's giving you a permanent conversation for 18 months or 2 years from now. So we're actually putting that in our CRM, what interest rate their loan is at. And it's a great conversation. It's preparing us for conversations down the road.
Yeah, very smart. Yep. And I think if your mortgage company isn't doing that for you, yep, we need to be doing that consistently. Absolutely. It's in our, it's actually now a field in our CRM as well. Smart. Cool. All right, friends, it's top of the hour. I appreciate you hanging out with me. This was kind of a more data driven path to $1 million than usual, but I hope the message for us is, remember the beginning, like we go to the past, we learn, we move forward. It is what made great conquerors, which all of us are. Well, that's what made them great conquerors, right? It's not just conquering and moving on. It's conquering the market that we just came out of, learning from it. And if we weren't in a previous market, well, great. Like, that's why I read the biography of the biography of Genghis Khan. Like, what can I learn from him? Let's read the biography of 2013 and 14 and 15 and 04 and 05 and 06 and 07. Some of you, Terry, were around for that. Like, right? Let's read those biographies and then bring them into the future with us. Cool. All right. Thanks for hanging out. We'll get the
Thanks,
recording,
guys.
and I'll get those slides out as well. The data slides, at least. No one needs to see Genghis Khan's face in a slide, but I'll get the rest of them to Katie Hardman, and we'll go with that. Thanks.
Thanks all.
Thanks, great stuff.